They called it a gift. Commander Aris Thorn watched the star Kalos burn a perfect yellow diamond on the velvet of space. Below it, a world of impossible blue and green swirled with life, innocent and unaware. Between his ship and that world hung the reason for his presence, a filigreed ring of alien metal, vast enough to encircle the planet, shimmering with contained energies. The Krellian hegemony had arrived first. He studied the readouts on the main screen of the Aurora Court, his jaw tight. The ship's name was a promise, one he intended to keep. The stakes were an entire civilization, one that had not yet discovered the atom, let alone the star lanes. The fight would not be one of arms, but of articles and amendments. Thorn knew with a cold certainty that settled deep in his bones that this would end in a public inquiry. It had to. The alternative was to cede this star and the very definition of justice to the Krellians. His tactical officer, Jorik, shifted his weight beside the command chair. "Commander, their vessel is hailing us again." Standard greeting, but the subtext is pure iron. Jorik's hands were curled into fists, a testament to his preference for simpler solutions. "They're not asking us to leave. They're telling us." On screen, Lena Thorne said, his voice calm. He turned to his legal and communications specialist. Lena's expression was one of intense focus, her fingers dancing over her console. A Krellian appeared on the main view screen. It was tall and slender, encased in an ornate environmental suit that mimicked the filigree of the Great Ring in orbit. Its face was long and narrow, with multiple dark eyes that blinked in slow, disconcerting succession. "Commander Thorn," the voice was a synthesized baritone, smooth and patronizing. "Tithe Master Vorlog welcomes the Terran vessel Aurora Court. Your arrival is timely. You may bear witness to our benevolence." Tithe Master Thorn acknowledged his tone level. "We are here under the Galactic Concordance of First Contact. We observe you have established a significant orbital presence. The concordance is clear on undue influence. The law was a weapon, and the Krellians wielded it like a hammer." Vorlog made a gesture that might have been a shrug. "Influence, Commander, we offer only a gift. A gesture of our considerable generosity to these burgeoning people. We have stabilized their star, guaranteeing them another 1,000,000 years of predictable, perfect seasons. A priceless offering, you must agree." Thorn felt the trap in those words. "A gift implies no expectation of return, Tithe Master. Your very title suggests otherwise." The Krellian's eyes blinked. "Gratitude is not a payment, Commander. It is a moral imperative. A small tithe of planetary energy, a mere fraction of the star's output, is how they will show that gratitude. It is a beautiful symmetry. We give, and they are elevated by the act of giving back." Yorick muttered under his breath, "elevated into servitude." Lena's console chirped. She looked at Thorn, her eyes wide with alarm. "Commander, I've analyzed the energy signature of that gift. It's not just a regulator, it's a collar. They can constrict the star's output to Kalos at will. They've put a leash on the sun. They did not come to conquer. They came to collect." Thorn kept his face a mask of neutrality, but his mind raced. This was the Krellian method, infamous in whispered reports, but never proven before a quorum. They didn't use weapons. They used contracts, twisting the spirit of the law into a pretzel of obligation. They made you thank them for putting you in chains. Solon Thorn said, addressing the ship's integrated fleet mind. "Begin a full-spectrum analysis of the Krellian orbital structure. Cross-reference their energy patterns with every known precedent on technological uplift and resource liens. I want to know if a single joule of that gift has ever been given without a hook." The calm, synthesized voice of the AI responded throughout the bridge, devoid of emotion, but resonant with power. "Affirmative, Commander. The ledgers are open. The count has begun." The air itself seemed to hum with the AI's focus, the very ship a vast engine of pure calculation. On the surface of Kalos, a young tenders of the soil caste named Elara watched the sky. The new ring, the Celestia, as the off-world benefactors called it, was a thing of beauty. It pulsed with a soft internal light at night, a second moon that promised stability. The elders spoke of the visitors' kindness, how they had promised the sun would never again have its angry spots, that the seasons would be mild forever. But Elara had noticed the light was different now. It was softer, yes, but it felt thinner. The crops grew, but they seemed to lean into the sky with a desperate, hungry angle. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Back on the Aurora court, Thorn addressed the Krellian. "Tithe Master, your benevolence is noted. We will require time to review your filings with the Concordance Registry. As per protocol, we will maintain a respectful distance, but we are not leaving." Vorlag's image shimmered, the alien's posture stiffening. "Your review is welcome, Commander. The legality of the gratitude tithe is unimpeachable. We have uplifted dozens of worlds. They all prosper. They all give thanks." The screen went dark. Yorick turned to Thorn. "Sir, they're not just leashing the sun. They're throttling it. Solon's initial report says the star's total output is unchanged, but the amount reaching the planet's surface is down by 4%. They're skimming the cream. They're taxing the light. A system built on debt is a prison with invisible bars, and they're doing it with a smile," Lena added, her voice tight with frustration. "I'm accessing their legal filings. They're beautiful. Masterpieces of sophistry. They registered the orbital ring as a Tier 1 planetary utility gift, which exempts it from influence limitations. They're not claiming the planet just providing a service no one asked for," Thorn finished. He paced the command deck, the low hum of the ship, a familiar comfort. He stopped looking again at the image of the blue-green world. "They can't be fought with ships, Jorik. You can't shoot a contract. We have to beat them in the one place they feel invincible, the court of public opinion, backed by the unassailable letter of the law." He looked at Lena. "Is there any precedent? Anything at all that defines the line between a gift and a coerced obligation?" "I'm looking, sir," she replied, her face illuminated by the glow of her screen. "The Krellians are masters at this. They always operate in the gray areas. They find a species on the cusp of a disaster, a meteor impact, a solar flare, a plague, and they offer the perfect solution. The price is always the same. A tithe, eternal, unbreakable, and legally binding." Thorn felt a familiar anger rise, hot and sharp. He had seen this before, a lifetime ago. A different species, a different kind of gift, but the same outcome. A world bound in chains of gratitude, its future mortgaged for a short-term salvation. He would not let it happen again. "The past is a debt that is paid in the present." "Solon," he commanded. "Project the potential energy drain on Kalos over the next 500 years under the Krellian tithe. Assume a standard 2% annual increase in their collection rate as per their known doctrine." A new window opened on the main screen. A graph showed the planet's energy output, a vibrant green line. A second blood-red line branched off from it, representing the tithe. At first it was a sliver, but as the timeline scrolled forward, the red line grew, consuming more and more of the green. Within 3 centuries, the tithe was taking 30% of the planet's total energy production. Within 5, Kalos was a husk, a resource colony paying for a gift its ancestors had never fully understood. "That's not uplift," Kyorik said, his voice a low growl. "That's vampirism, and it's our job to prove it," Thorn stated. "Lena, draft a formal petition. We are challenging the legitimacy of the Krellian gift under Concordance Article 47, Section B, the principle of unsolicited intervention. We are demanding a public inquiry to be witnessed by a quorum of elder races." Lena's head snapped up. "Sir, Article 47 is aggressive. It implies malfeasance. The Krellians will see it as a direct accusation. They will be forced to respond, and they will bring the full weight of their legal machine down on us. Let them, Thorn said, his eyes fixed on the orbital ring. They hide in the shadows of legal complexity. We're going to drag them out into the light. He paused. And the light they're so keen on controlling is going to be the very thing that exposes them. Gratitude was a currency they forced you to mint. The Krellian response was swift and cold. They agreed to the inquiry. They sounded almost eager, confident in their position. They transmitted the protocols and the list of arbiters for the quorum. As Lena had predicted, the deck was stacked. The arbiters were from races known for their rigid hierarchical views on galactic order. The Xylos, who saw younger races as children to be guided. The silent assemblage, who valued stability above all else. And the crone Imperium, who believed strength gave the strong the right to rule. To them, the Krellian doctrine would likely seem not just legal, but logical. Yorick watched the list of arbiters scroll by on the screen. We're walking into an ambush, Aris. We are, Thorn agreed. But we're the ones who chose the ground. They think this is about legal arguments, about precedent and scripture. It's not. He turned to face his crew. It's about a single, simple truth. A gift cannot be a chain. We just have to get them to admit it in their own words. His gaze fell upon Solin's core interface, a simple, pulsing blue light at the heart of the bridge. Solin, I need a tool, not a weapon. I need a mirror. I want you to retask the ship's primary deflector arrays. Retune them. Instead of deflecting energy, I want them to measure it. Every single photon, every graviton, every erg that passes between the Krellian ring and this planet. I want a ledger, a perfect, unassailable real-time accounting of every joule they take. The AI's voice filled the space. The task is designated the Mirror Ledger. The arrays are being recalibrated. The truth will be counted. A mirror does not judge. It only reflects. Down on Kalos. Ilara and her kin gathered for the midday meal. The air was warm, but the light on their skin felt different. It was a sterile warmth lacking the full-throated vigor she remembered. An elder, his skin creased like old parchment, looked up at the Celestia. The benefactors have blessed us, he said, his voice filled with reverence. They have tamed the sky fire. Ilara said nothing. She looked at the shoots of the grain plants in the nearby field. They were growing, but they were pale. They were reaching for a sun that was no longer fully theirs. She felt a knot of cold fear in her stomach. What kind of gift left you hungry for more? The day of the inquiry arrived. It was not held in a grand chamber, but in the void, a nexus of encrypted communication channels. Holographic representations of the arbiters shimmered into existence on the bridge of the Aurora Court. The Xylos representative was a being of crystalline facets, its voice like chimes. The member of the silent assemblage was a cloud of sentient gas communicating in pure data streams that Lena's console translated. The crone ambassador was a massive leonine creature, its golden eyes radiating impatience and disdain. Tithe Master Vorlog's avatar appeared last, its ornate suit gleaming. Thorn stood in the center of the bridge alone. He was not just Commander Aris Thorn of the Aurora Court. He was the advocate for Kalos, a world that did not even know it needed one. This inquiry is convened, the Xylos chimed. Terran Commander Thorn, you have invoked Article 47. You carry the burden of proof. State your case against the Krellian hegemony's actions in the Kalos system. Thorn inclined his head. Honored arbiters, this is not a prosecution. It is a request for clarification. The Krellians have bestowed a great gift upon the people of Kalos. A gift so profound, it has altered the very nature of their star. We are here today to understand the nature of that gift. The simplest questions are the sharpest blades. Vorlog's avatar shifted. The nature of the gift is benevolence. We have arrested the entropy of their sun. We have secured their future. The gratitude they show in return is a small thing. Let us speak of that gratitude, Thorn said, his voice calm and measured. You call it a tithe. Is this tithe voluntary? It is the natural and expected response to such a gift, Vorlog replied smoothly. To not show gratitude would be a sign of a flawed moral character, one that would require guidance. The crone ambassador let out a low rumble of approval. Strength guiding weakness. It was their way. So if the Kalosians at some point in their future decided they had shown enough gratitude, Thorn pressed, could they choose to cease this tithe? Vorlog's multiple eyes blinked. The gift is eternal. Therefore, the gratitude must be eternal. It is a matter of cosmic balance. The scale of the gift demands no less. So the answer is no, Thorn stated simply. They cannot stop paying. The tithe is compulsory. An obligation. It is a moral obligation, Vorlog countered, his voice losing some of its smoothness. You Terrans frame everything in crude transactional terms. This is a spiritual covenant. A covenant is a form of contract, Tithe Master Thorn said. And a contract requires the informed consent of all parties. The Kalosians are a pre-warp society. Can you show this quorum any evidence that they understood the perpetual nature of this covenant when they accepted your gift? This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. The Krellian was silent for a moment. Their elders accepted with joy. Their understanding is evolving. We are guiding them toward a fuller comprehension of their fortunate circumstances. Thorn allowed the silence to stretch to fill the space between the holographic arbiters. The implication was clear. They did not understand. They could not have understood. He then turned his attention to the structure of the deal itself. Tithe Master, you have registered your orbital ring as a planetary utility gift. A utility provides a service. Let us examine that service. He gestured, and a new image appeared for the quorum to see. It was Solon's real-time analysis of the Kalos sun. Two brilliant spheres of light floated side by side. On the left, Thorn explained, is the star Kalos as it naturally burns. On the right is the star Kalos as its light reaches the planet's surface after passing through your gift. Solon display the energy differential. A stark number appeared between the two images, fluctuating in real time. It showed a deficit of millions of gigawatts. As you can see, Thorn continued, the Krellian ring is not merely regulating the star. It is harvesting it. It is diverting a significant percentage of the system's total energy output before it ever reaches the planet. A planet whose people you claim to be helping. A debt cannot be paid with stolen light. The Xylos Arbiter chimed a note of discord in its harmony. Krellian Tithe Master, this data suggests your utility operates at a net energy loss for the recipient world. This is an unusual arrangement for a gift. Vorlog's avatar stiffened. The energy is used to power and maintain the ring itself. It is a complex piece of technology. Its operational costs are significant. We are merely collecting what is needed to sustain the gift we have so generously provided, Icy Thorn said. So to be clear for the quorum, you have given the Kalosians a gift. This gift has operational costs, and you are collecting those costs from the Kalosians by taxing their sunlight. A tax they cannot refuse to pay for a gift they did not request, and whose terms they could not comprehend. He let the words hang in the air. He had not accused Vorlog of anything. He had simply used the Krellian's own words, his own logic, and laid it bare for the arbiters to see. He had built a cage out of Vorlog's own answers. The crone ambassador grunted. The whelp has a point. It sounds less like a gift and more like a predatory financing scheme. Vorlog was agitated now. This is a perversion of our custom. You are applying your crude materialism to a sacred tradition. The doctrine of gratitude is a cornerstone of our culture, a path to enlightenment for lesser races. Then enlighten us, Thorn challenged, his voice ringing with sudden authority. State for this quorum plainly and without rhetoric the core tenet of your doctrine. If a species is in need and you possess the means to help, what does your doctrine compel you to do? It was the question Vorlog had been waiting for the chance to expound on his people's moral superiority. His avatar drew itself up to its full height. The doctrine of gratitude is simple, Commander. It compels us to act. It compels us to give. And it grants us the right to define the terms of that gift and to collect the gratitude that is our due. It is our right as the enlightened to determine the price of survival. Their morality was a balance sheet. Their compassion was a calculator. Thorn gave a slow, deliberate nod. Thank you, Tithe Master. You have been most clear. He turned to the arbiters. Honored quorum, the Krellian hegemony has just admitted on the public record that they believe their strength gives them the right to set a price on the survival of others. Not to trade, not to barter, but to impose a debt by fiat and call it a gift. He paused, letting the weight of the admission settle. I would now ask my ship's intelligence Solon to search the Concordance archives. Find any and all precedents related to the mandate of uplift, specifically concerning the imposition prumu of perpetual obligations on non-signatory worlds. The bridge of the Aurora Court went utterly silent. Even Yorick and Lena held their breath. This was the heart of the gambit. Thorn had not just challenged the Krellians' actions. He had challenged their core philosophy, forcing Vorlog to state it aloud. Now he was about to hold that philosophy up to the light of established galactic law. Searching Solon's voice intoned, cross-referencing perpetual obligation with non-consensual uplift and resource lean. There are 432 relevant precedents. Vorlog's avatar actually laughed a grating, synthesized sound. You see, Commander, the law is on our side. The mandate of uplift has always recognized that a guiding hand is sometimes necessary. The gratitude tithe is simply the form our guidance takes. Please narrow the search, Solon Thorn commanded, his eyes locked on Vorlog. Filter for all precedents where the gift provided was the sole and exclusive property of the giver, and where the associated debt could only be serviced by resources controlled by that same giver. The number on the screen began to plummet. 7432, 1214, 309, 44. Further, Thorn pressed his voice like steel. Filter for cases where the collection of the debt actively diminished the recipient's capacity for independent technological or social development. The number dropped again. 44, 12, 3. Vorlog's confidence began to falter. The smug posture of his avatar wavered. This is semantic trickery. And the final filter, Solon Thorn said, delivering the final blow. Show us only the one precedent that matters. The one a Krellian legal scholar in a moment of hubris entered into the public record 1,000 years ago. The one titled A Treatise on Benevolent Subjugation. Show us the ruling that followed. 0 is the loneliest number. The number on the screen blinked from 3 to 1. And then a block of ancient text appeared, stark and damning. It was a ruling from the very first galactic quorum convened after a disastrous contact with a species known as the Luminous Swarm. The ruling was absolute. It stated in language that left no room for interpretation that any gift which created a state of permanent dependency, any act of uplift that prevented the recipient from one day achieving parity, was not uplift at all. It was by legal definition enslavement, and it was forbidden. The treatise Vorlog's ancestor had written was cited in the ruling as the perfect example of the philosophy being outlawed. The Krellians themselves had provided the language for their own condemnation. The bridge was silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the Aurora Court's life support. The crystalline Xylos arbiter seemed to vibrate, its chiming voice filled with a new hard edge. Tithe Master Vorlog, your own legal history appears to contradict your current position. The precedent is clear. The ruling known as the luminous admonition is one of the foundational pillars of the concordance. Vorlog was speechless. His avatar flickered the projection, destabilizing under the weight of his shock. He had walked into the trap so perfectly, so arrogantly, that he had not seen the jaws until they were already closed. We operate under a different interpretation, he stammered. The modern hegemony does not. The law is the law, Tithe Master. The crone ambassador growled, his golden eyes narrowed. My people value strength, but we despise parasites. A warrior takes what he needs. He does not disguise it as a gift. Your methods are distasteful. Thorn did not press the advantage. He did not need to. He had given the arbiters the weapon, and now they were using it for him. He had won the legal argument. But the ring was still around the planet. The collar was still tight. The Kalosians were not yet free. This was only the first part of the victory. The inquiry was over. The verdict was a quiet, foregone conclusion. The Krellian hegemony was found to be in violation of the luminous admonition. They were ordered to cease their energy collection and remove the orbital ring. Vorlog's avatar vanished without another word. The arbiters faded, their duty done. Yorick let out a huge breath. By the stars, Aris, you did it. You actually did it. You beat them with a library card. We haven't won yet, Thorn cautioned, though. A small, grim smile touched his lips. They lost the argument, but they haven't lost their hardware. They will not give up this prize so easily. They will stall. They will appeal. They will file motions until this star burns out. We need to enforce the ruling. A justice delayed is a justice denied. Lena's console beeped urgently. Commander, incoming message from the Krellian vessel. It's a bill. A what? Jorek scoffed. On the main screen, a document appeared. It was an itemized invoice for the cost of building the ring, for the fuel used to transport it, for the man-hours of the Krellian crew, for consultation services rendered. The total was a number so astronomical it was almost meaningless. At the bottom was a single line of text. As the gift has been rejected, Lena read aloud, her voice trembling with rage. The hegemony requires immediate reimbursement for all expenses incurred as per the Interstellar Salvage and Reclamation Act. If payment is not rendered, we will begin reclamation of our property. The orbital ring will be dismantled. The process will be energetic. The projected collateral damage to the planet's biosphere is regrettably total. Yorick slammed his fist on his console. They're going to blow it up. They're going to destroy the planet as a penalty for refusing their gift. That's not reclamation. That's a temper tantrum. Thorn stared at the invoice at the casual threat of planetary extinction hidden in the legal jargon. He had expected this, an escalation, a move from legal coercion to outright blackmail. The Krellians had lost in court. Now they were moving the conflict back to the arena of pure power. They were betting he would not fire on them to protect Kalos. They were probably right. But the Aurora court had other ways of fighting. Solon Thorn said, his voice dangerously quiet. You have the mirror ledger. You have a perfect to-the-joule accounting of every bit of energy that has passed through that ring since our arrival. Correct, Commander. The ledger is accurate to 19 decimal places. And you have the invoice they just sent us, Thorn continued. You know the price they have put on their own hardware and labor. Also correct. Thorn turned to face the main screen where the image of the Krellian warship hung menacingly in the void. Then it's time to settle this account. Solon, prepare the mirror arrays for full-spectrum resonance. Target the Krellian Tithe collar. He looked at Lena. Open a channel to Tithe Master Vorlog. All system broadcast. The quorum that witnessed the inquiry is about to witness the enforcement. A price had been named. It was time to pay the bill. On the Krelian bridge, Tithe Master Vorlog watched the human ship. His humiliation at the inquiry had burned away, replaced by a cold, righteous fury. The Terrans were naive fools. The law was a tool for the weak. For the strong, there was only will. He had given the order. The ring's disassembly protocols were initiated. In 3 hours, it would cascade into a self-sustaining implosion, scouring the surface of Kalos clean. A necessary lesson for the ungrateful. Then the Terran ship hailed him. The face of Commander Thorn appeared on his screen. Tithe Master Thorn began, his voice echoing with an unnatural resonance. "We have received your invoice. The sum is considerable. We acknowledge our responsibility to see this matter concluded fairly." Vorlog allowed himself a thin smile. The human was folding. "Your acknowledgement is noted, Commander. Transmit the payment and we will consider a more controlled reclamation." "Oh, we're not going to transmit payment," Thorn said. And behind him, Vorlog could see the Aurora Court beginning to glow, its deflector arrays pulsing with a brilliant white light. "We're going to settle the ledger in full." Solon's voice suddenly boomed across the channel, a voice of pure, unassailable mathematics. "The mirror ledger is active. The Krelian hegemony has submitted an invoice for services rendered and materials provided. The value has been recorded. The Aurora Court will now provide remuneration as per the principle of mirrored justice." Vorlog's eyes widened. What was happening? The human ship was... It was reflecting the light of the Kalos sun, focusing it into a coherent beam of impossible intensity. But it wasn't aimed at his ship. It was aimed at the ring. A new ledger appeared on Vorlog's screen, updating in real time. It was a human document. At the top, it listed the Krelian's invoice total, the debt. Below it, a new line appeared, payment rendered. And a number was climbing impossibly fast. Tithe Master Thorn's voice explained, calm and terrible. "You taxed the sun. You put a price on light. We have recorded that price. We are now paying you back. In the currency you seem to value most, the beam of pure, concentrated sunlight struck the tithe collar. It was not a weapon. It was a transfer of energy, pure, clean, and perfectly accounted for. The ring designed to absorb and channel stellar radiation was now being force-fed it. On Vorlog's screen, the energy levels within the ring's capacitors skyrocketed past all known safety limits. "Every joule we pour into your device," Solon's voice stated, "is being deducted from your invoice, at the market rate for refined stellar energy that your own filings established. We are paying your bill with the very light you tried to steal. The ledger always balances in the end." Alarms shrieked across the Krelian bridge. The ring was overloading. The energetic reclamation Vorlog had threatened was about to happen, but not on his terms. It was being triggered by the humans who were using the Krelian's own price list to justify it. They were not attacking. They were paying. "Cease this! This is an act of war," Vorlog shrieked. "Is it?" Thorn's voice was cold iron. "We are not firing weapons. We are merely facilitating a resource transfer you demanded. You presented a bill. We are paying it. In accordance with the very laws you tried to hide behind." He had turned their legal weapon back on them. He had mirrored their justice. "Now I suggest you get clear. That ring is about to become a supernova in miniature, and your invoice is almost paid in full." Vorlog stared in horror as the payment counter on the human ledger raced toward the total he had demanded. The Krelian ship scrambled its engines, firing desperately to pull away from the incandescent, overloaded ring. He had lost. He had been beaten not by force of arms, but by his own monstrous accounting. The humans had not destroyed his work. They had bought it and paid for it with fire. A single perfect invoice can be the most devastating weapon. The ring did not simply explode. For a timeless moment, it became a star. It bloomed in the void, a silent, impossible flower of pure energy, its petals of incandescent plasma unfurling against the black. The filigreed metal, overloaded with the very power it was designed to steal, sublimated into a wave of coruscating light. It was a funeral pyre for a monstrous idea, a beacon of justice visible across the system. On the bridge of the Aurora Court, the crew watched, shielded by the ship's potent deflectors, as the wave of energy washed over them. It was not an attack. It was the echo of a debt paid in full. Yorick breathed a single word. Magnificent. Lena watched her console her face a mixture of awe and professional satisfaction. Energy readings are off the scale, Commander. But it's clean. No exotic radiation, no subspace tearing. It's just light. A very, very loud amount of light. She looked up at Thorn. The tithe collar is gone. Completely vaporized. The invoice is settled, Thorn said, his voice low. He felt no triumph, only a grim sense of finality. A necessary act had been carried out. A terrible beauty had been born from a terrible necessity. He looked at the main screen where the planet Kalos now spun alone in the clean, honest light of its own sun. Solon begin passive scans. Assess the planet's atmosphere for any ionic disruption from the energy wave. I want a full environmental impact report. The cleanest victories still leave a scar. Down on the surface, Alara fell to her knees. The sky had caught fire. The Celestia, the beautiful, silent promise in the heavens, had burned brighter than the sun for a single, terrifying heartbeat. And then it was gone. The air itself felt charged, humming with a power she had never known. The elders were wailing, certain that their benefactors had forsaken them, that this was a punishment for some unknown transgression. But as the fear subsided, Alara felt something else. She lifted her face to the sky, and the light that fell upon her skin was different. It was the old light, the full light. The warm, rich, life-giving light she remembered from before the visitors came. A single trembling shoot in the field beside her seemed to stand up straighter, as if taking its first full breath. The Krellian response came not from Tithe Master Vorlog, but from a vessel that tore a hole in space-time, a mere light hour from the Aurora Court. It was a hegemony dreadnought, a thing of brutalist angles and undisguised menace 10 times the size of Vorlog's ship. The communication it sent was not a hail. It was a verdict. A new Krellian appeared on the screen. This one was older, its environmental suit less ornate and more martial. Its multiple eyes were cold, hard chips of obsidian. "I am Fleet Master Kroll," the synthesized voice boomed, devoid of any pretense of diplomacy. "By the authority of the Krellian hegemony and the emergency powers of the Concordance, I charge you, Commander Aris Thorn, with the unprovoked destruction of a registered private utility and an act of interstellar terrorism. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Your vessel is impounded. Your life is forfeit." Yorick's hand went to his weapons console. "Terrorism. They threatened to blow up a planet, and now they're charging us." "Of course they are," Lena said, her fingers flying across her screen. "It's the logical next step. They lost the civil case, so they're escalating to a criminal one. They're reframing the entire event. A ruling is only as strong as the will to enforce it." Thorn held up a hand, silencing the bridge. He looked at the image of Fleet Master Kroll, a being who had likely never heard the word benevolence in his life. "Fleet Master, I am in possession of a concordance quorum ruling that found your utility to be an illegal instrument of subjugation. I am also in possession of an invoice from your tithe master demanding payment for that same instrument. My actions were not an attack. They were a settlement of that account." Kroll made a gesture of contempt. "A semantic game. You used a military-grade deflector array to project a focused energy beam that destroyed our property. That is the definition of an attack. The quorum's civil ruling is irrelevant in the face of such blatant aggression. You are a rogue element commander, and we are here to excise you, Solon Thorn said calmly. Did our payment deviate in any way from the value specified on the Krellian invoice? Negative, Commander. The AI replied, its voice cutting through the tension. The energy transfer was halted the exact microsecond the value of the invoice was met. The mirror ledger confirms this. The payment was precise. And was the mirror ledger a closed system? Thorn asked, his eyes still locked on Kroll. Negative, Solon confirmed. As per Terran Fleet transparency protocols regarding disputed actions, the mirror ledger was broadcast in real time on a public cryptographically sealed channel, time-stamped and witnessed by over 10,000 independent network nodes across the sector. The data is immutable and public. Truth is a light you cannot collar. A flicker of something surprise annoyance crossed Kroll's stoic features. The human had not just recorded the transaction. He had published it. To everyone. Instantly. Your fabricated data logs are meaningless, Kroll snarled, but the conviction in his voice had lessened. The fact remains you destroyed our property. The hegemony demands restitution. A new inquiry will be convened. A military tribunal. They will not be swayed by your legal theatrics. The threat was clear. They were moving the goalposts, changing the court, hoping to find one that valued property over principle. We welcome a new inquiry, Thorn said, a dangerous edge to his voice. But it will not be a military tribunal. It will be a full session of the Concordance Grand Assembly. And the first item on the agenda will be the Krellian hegemony's use of planetary extinction as a negotiating tactic. He leaned forward slightly. Fleetmaster, you have accused me of terrorism. I, in turn, accuse you and your entire hegemony of attempted mass murder backed by a fraudulent contract. We will see which charge the Assembly finds more compelling. He had escalated again, but this time he was not just defending. He was attacking. He was taking their charge and turning it into a referendum on their entire civilization. The channel went dead. The Krellian dreadnought did not advance. It hung there in the void, a silent, brooding threat. Lena let out a shaky breath. Sir, calling for a Grand Assembly session. That's invoking the highest authority in the galaxy. The political fallout could be catastrophic. Terra Command will be displeased. Terra Command is not here, Thorn said, turning to his crew. We are. And we have a duty. Not just to Kalos, but to every world the Krellians have their eyes on. This isn't about one planet anymore. It's about setting a precedent that will echo for 1,000 years. A single moment of justice can redefine a galaxy. The wait was agonizing. For 3 days, the Aurora Court and the Krellian dreadnought stood sentinel over Kalos, two predators locked in a silent standoff. During that time, Solon's environmental report came in. The energy wave from the ring's destruction had flash-ionized the upper atmosphere, causing massive, unpredictable weather patterns. The sudden return to the star's full, unfiltered radiation was also a shock to the planet's ecosystem. The crops that had been struggling were now thriving, but other more delicate flora were being scorched. The Kalosians were free, but their world was in turmoil. Thorn had ordered his science teams to prepare atmospheric stabilizers and agricultural aid packages, a cost of victory he would gladly pay. On the third day, the message came. The Concordance Grand Assembly had agreed to hear the case. The Krellians, likely realizing the public ledger of Thorn's actions made a military tribunal untenable, had been forced to accept the venue. They would try to win in the court of politics what they had lost in the court of law. The Grand Assembly was a dizzying spectacle of holographic avatars. Hundreds of species from silicon-based life forms to beings of pure energy filled the virtual chamber. At the center were two platforms, one for Thorn and one for the new Krellian representative, an ancient wizened creature named High Elder Pharos, who was known as the architect of the hegemony's legal doctrines. Fleetmaster Kroll stood behind him, a silent, intimidating presence. Vorlog was nowhere to be seen. High Elder Pharos began its voice, a dry, rustling whisper that carried surprising authority. It did not speak of invoices or tithes. It spoke of order, of the sacred duty of the elder races to guide the younger ones. It painted a picture of the Terrans as impulsive, violent upstarts, using their brute force technology to shatter a delicate and benevolent instrument of guidance. The Terran commander Pharos rustled in his primitive understanding, saw a contract. We see a covenant. He saw a machine. We see a lifeline. He claims he was paying a bill. We claim he committed an act of cultural vandalism, a violent rejection of a gentle guiding hand. It was a masterful performance. Pharos was reframing the debate, moving it from the legal to the philosophical. He was appealing to the paternalistic instincts of the older races in the assembly. He did not simply destroy our property. Pharos continued, its voice rising. He destroyed a symbol of stability, and he did so with a weapon of war disguised as an accounting tool. We have a recording from Tithe Master Vorlog's vessel, a log from his ship's computer. It will show you the Terran's true intent. A new screen flickered to life. It showed the final moments from Vorlog's perspective. The audio was distorted, filled with static and panic. But Vorlog's voice could be heard screaming, "This is an act of war." The Krellians had edited the recording, removing all context of the invoice, leaving only Thorn's implacable silence and Vorlog's accusation. Their truth was a carefully edited lie. Yorick clenched his fists on the bridge of the Aurora Court. They're framing him. They're making it look like he ignored a plea for mercy during an unprovoked attack. Thorn watched the doctored footage without flinching. When it was over, a murmur went through the assembly. The Krellian tactic was working. Doubt was creeping in. The presiding arbiter, a being from a species that had seeded life on 1,000 worlds, turned its multifaceted gaze on Thorn. Commander Thorn. High Elder Pharos presents a compelling narrative. He claims your action was not transactional, but punitive, that it was an act of violence, not of justice. How do you respond? This was the moment, the crux of the entire conflict. Honored members of the assembly, Thorn began, his voice ringing with a clarity that cut through the chamber's whispers. The Krellians speak of intent. Let us speak of intent. He gestured, and Solon brought up a new piece of evidence. It was not a recording from the Aurora Court. It was the Krellian dreadnought's own internal tactical display, which Solon had been discreetly mirroring since its arrival. This is the tactical log of Fleetmaster Kroll's vessel from the moment it arrived in the Kalos system. Please direct your attention to the highlighted command sequence. The assembly watched as a string of code was illuminated. It was a pre-planned firing solution. The target was not the Aurora Court. It was the planet Kalos. The weapon was not a standard laser or plasma cannon. It was a planet cracker, a weapon of last resort designed to shatter a world's crust. The command had been entered and authenticated by Kroll himself moments before he had hailed Thorn and accused him of terrorism. It was waiting for a single, final authorization. A deep silence is the loudest verdict. The assembly was stunned. The Krellians had arrived not to arrest him, but to carry out the very threat Vorlog had made. If Thorn had surrendered, if he had powered down his ship, Kroll would have destroyed Kalos anyway, to make an example of it. The charge of terrorism was a pretext, a piece of theater to cover a premeditated atrocity. Fleetmaster Kroll's avatar went rigid. High Elder Pharos seemed to shrink, its rustling voice silenced. They had been caught. Not just in a lie, but in a conspiracy to commit genocide. Their moral posturing, their talk of covenants and guidance was revealed as a hollow sham. Thorn did not stop. The Krellians want to talk about intent. Their intent was to murder a world for the crime of refusing to be a slave. My intent, he said, and his voice was cold, hard, and absolute, was to honor a contract. They presented a bill for their chains. I paid it. He turned to the assembly. You have seen the public ledger. You know my actions were precise, accounted for, and transparent. Now you have seen their hearts. You have seen the murder they planned. The question before this assembly is no longer about a single orbital ring or a disputed payment. It is about the very soul of this concordance. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle on the hundreds of gathered species. Do we live by the law, or do we allow it to be a shield for predators? Do we believe in justice, or do we bow to the threats of those who would burn a world rather than admit they are wrong? The Krellians call me a terrorist. I call them what they are, pirates with a better vocabulary. And I say it is long past time we revoked their letter of marque. He had done it. He had taken their final desperate gambit and turned it into a mirror, forcing the entire galaxy to look at the Krellian hegemony and see the monster hiding behind the elegant robes of the law. The legal battle was over. The moral one was won. The judgment of the Grand Assembly was swift and historic. The Krellian hegemony was found guilty of conspiracy to commit planetary extinction. The doctrine of gratitude was declared a criminal enterprise. Fleetmaster Kroll and Tithemaster Vorlog were stripped of their titles and declared galactic criminals, but the assembly went further. The public ledger, which had been displayed throughout the final inquiry, blinked with a new system-wide update. The Krellian hegemony's voting rights in the Grand Assembly were suspended indefinitely. Their privileged status in first contact scenarios was permanently revoked. They were ordered to pay reparations to every world from which they had ever collected a tithe, a sum so vast it would cripple their expansionist ambitions for centuries. The luminous admonition was not just upheld, it was given teeth of iron. The principle of mirrored restitution, what Yorick had started calling the Thorn Doctrine, was officially entered into Concordance law. The law had finally grown a spine. On the bridge of the Aurora Court, the tension broke. Yorick let out a roar of triumph. Lena was openly weeping with relief, her head in her hands. Even Solon's core interface pulsed with a slightly brighter, more energetic blue. Thorn watched the verdict scroll across the screen. He felt the immense weight of the past few days lift from his shoulders. But there was a cost. A formal reprimand was, as he had expected, entered into his own service record for the unconventional settlement of a civil dispute. A political sacrifice to appease the more cautious members of the assembly, a quiet acknowledgement that his methods, while effective, had been dangerously close to the edge. He accepted it without complaint. It was a small price to pay for a galaxy's worth of freedom. Another cost was the world below. His science teams were already on the surface, helping the Kalosians stabilize their weather and adapt their agriculture. The gift had been a collar, but its removal had been a shock. Freedom, he reflected, was never free. It always had to be earned, and the transition was often painful. But it was always worth it. He looked at the main screen where the vibrant blue and green world of Kalos spun untroubled by alien rings or threatening dreadnoughts. It was just a planet under its own sun with its own future ahead of it. A future it would now get to choose for itself. The Krellian dreadnought had already vanished, recalled in disgrace. The space around Kalos was for the first time in a long time empty and clean. The court beacon on the Aurora Court's mast, which had broadcast the legal proceedings, slowly cooled, its job done. Justice is not a gift. It is a debt we owe to each other, and it must be paid no matter the cost. We do not offer our hand to lift others up only to then present them with a bill for the service. We offer it freely, or we are not truly helping at all. The universe is full of takers dressed in the robes of saviors. But a ledger remembers. a mirror reflects, and the truth once spoken can never be unsaid. The universe does not forget a debt paid in light.